welcome to Real Life. Hey, my name is Jake, and I get to be one of the pastors around here, and I'm so grateful that you made this part of your weekend. If you and I have yet to meet, I sure hope we can fix that very soon. Make sure to come say hey after the service. Before we jump in, I want to remind you that next weekend is a weekend of change here at Real Life. We've been calling it for the last few weeks, Move to Make Room. If you've been around for the last few months, then you may have noticed more and more people starting to call Real Life their church home. We love that. Over the last couple weeks, a couple weeks ago, you helped by taking a survey telling us who you are, and it was very informative to us. And one of the things that we learned was that in a given weekend, 13% of everybody here has only been here 5 times or less. That's a lot of new people. And we love you. We're so glad you're here if that's you. In fact, if you call Real Life home, will you put your hands together and help me welcome anyone that's new to Real Life? Man, we're so grateful that you took that step. It's not lost on us how big of a deal that is. And one of the hallmarks of this place is that we are always willing to do whatever it takes to remove unnecessary barriers that might keep people from finding the hope of Jesus. And sometimes those unnecessary barriers come in the form of a lack of parking spots, or not enough kids space, or available service times. And so we're always willing to be open-handed with our preferences and our habits to make room for our friends and neighbors and coworkers that need to hear about Jesus. And so next weekend, we're going to see some change. First of all, our service times are changing. So our Thursday night service is going to 6:30, and then everything on Sunday morning is sliding a half hour later. So 9, 10:30, and 12 is what we're hoping that you will find one of those and make that your new thing. Now, I don't know if you know this, but church folks are notorious for being creatures of habit. You may even find yourself attending the same service time every week, parking on the same side of the parking lot every week, sitting in the same row every week, and eating the same colored donut every single week. And so I am thanking you in advance for being open-handed with your habits and helping us make room. We're excited to see that change happen next weekend as we get to wrap up this series that we're in right now called The Good Life. And over the last few weeks, we've been looking at this list that Jesus gave us in a book of the Bible called Matthew, specifically in chapter 5. And it's this list that's become known as the Beatitudes. And that word comes from a Latin word named beatus, that means blessed. And so this is the way that Jesus is describing a blessed life, the kind of people that will really be happy in this world. But what we've discovered over the last few weeks is that the target you and I aim at on our own is quite different than the target that Jesus provides us in Matthew chapter 5, this good life. Now, from the moment you were born, someone was trying to sell you a product that promised the good life. They said, if you will just buy my thing, then I can unlock your mental, emotional, and physical health. I will make you the best version of you. Then you bought it, and it didn't lead to the good life at all. For instance, this sounds crazy now, but in the 1950s, in magazines, doctors would endorse certain kinds of cigarettes, all right, saying that they would not make your throat hurt as bad. All right, that was the sales pitch. That was poorly researched. That didn't really work out. Then the Skechers shoe company, they invented this shape-up shoe that promised to tone your legs and your backside without any exercise at all. All you had to do was walk. And apparently being endorsed by a Kardashian does not guarantee results, because Skechers had to pay $40 million in fines for false advertising. And then maybe you're a kid of the 90s. How many of you grew up eating Flintstones vitamins? All right, Flintstones vitamins, they were delicious. All right? Until the critics pointed out all the artificial coloring and the added sugar and the absence of nutrients. And I was like, I knew it. I knew nothing healthy could ever taste that good. All right, it just didn't lead to the good life. Now, what's amazing is that the longer you spend with the teachings of Jesus, he doesn't talk like that at all. His pitch, his invitation to follow him doesn't sound like, if you follow me, I'll unlock the best version of you. I'll help you thrive. I'll help you achieve your goals. I will optimize your life. He doesn't say that in any way, shape, or form. Now, it's true that there are certain parts of our life that will get better by following Jesus. Like we'll become a more patient parent because we know that God is still fathering us. We'll become more compassionate to the less fortunate because we're convinced that God has given us everything that we have. But all of those are secondary. The primary reason that we follow Jesus is because he's God and he's true. And what he said is the truth. What he promised to do did happen. And so our response to God sending his son to live a perfect life on our behalf is our full devotion. The benefits to our lives are a distant second to responding to God showing up for you and then for me. And so we're going to take another look at this list that Jesus gave us, and we're actually going to look at two of them today. Ask, why did God say, God blesses those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they will be satisfied, and God blesses those who work for peace, for they will be called the children of God. Now, when you look at this list, one of the important things to note is that this is not 8 different kinds of people that Jesus is describing. He's describing one person with 8 different attributes. So he's saying all of this will be true about every follower of Jesus. We get them all. So this isn't some menu that we walk up to like we're customizing our burger order at In-N-Out and saying, I want some of this, want some of that. So we don't come here and say, oh, you know what? I would love to be more humble and I'd like to experience more peace, but honestly, don't really want to mourn. I wouldn't sign up for persecution, so you can leave that off my order. Jesus is saying, no, this is going to be true, all of these, about every follower of Jesus. So how do we pursue justice and pursue peace in our lives? Well, one thing that's undeniable is that conflict is all around us. It's part of every single one of us, whether this is your very first time or your 1,000th time here at Real Life. Conflict surrounds us. It's part of the universal human condition. And one thing as humans is that we can find a way of fighting about just about anything. I think about when your friend group is together and it's time to order a pizza. Inevitably, there is always that one friend that advocates for adding pineapple to the pizza. How many of you are anti-pineapple? Show of hands. All right, you don't like the hot fruit. How many of you are that person? You always want the pineapple on your pizza. Okay. You are why life is difficult. All right, I just want you to know that. It's your fault, all right? I didn't even know this was an argument until this week, but apparently there's a debate as to which should hit the bowl first. When you're making a bowl of cereal, do you put the cereal in and then the milk? Or do you put the milk in and then the cereal? How many are you second? You go milk first, cereal second, show of hands? All right. Do you also put your shoes on before your socks? All right, that makes no sense whatsoever. You are out of order. And then this one, we actually don't even need to vote today because there is an answer, even though there is a debate in many households as to which side the toilet paper, do we go over, do we go under? But the debate has ended today because when the original patent was submitted to the U.S. government by the inventor Joseph Gaiety, it's over. It's over. The toilet paper is over. The debate is over, all right? That's how this works. We'll find anything to fight about. Now, if it was just pineapple and toilet paper in our lives, that would be awesome. But you and I know that conflict is everywhere, and it's way more serious than that. We see it on a global scale. We see in the news conflict between Russia and Ukraine and on the Gaza Strip. We hear constant stories of conflict on the floors of Congress and the California State House. And then personally, it almost feels like it's impossible to get all of our relationships to be peaceful at the same time. Whether you're married or you're dating, you and your partner, all of a sudden what used to be easy is now hard. And you can't communicate, it's tense. And so you do the right thing and you go get some counseling, you get some therapy, they give you tools. And now you see light at the end of the tunnel only for something to flare up with your parents. Either unmet or even unsaid expectations have led to a feeling of disappointment. So now your attention is to settling that down. only for that to get better. And one of your friends says, hey, by the way, you haven't been paying much attention to me. You've been with your spouse, you've been with your parents. I need some of your attention, so you put it over there. And then you settle that one, and all of a sudden something at work flares up. Someone went over your head and behind your back, and they're diminishing your professional reputation. And how many of you are just stressed out thinking about it right now? So what do we do? Like, how can we actually experience peace in this life? Like, can I really resolve every relational conflict I'm experiencing? Well, if you could, then you probably already would have. Can I make my kids be kinder to one another? Can I reconcile the relationship between my mom and my estranged sister? Well, I don't know about your track record, but I haven't found much success in making people do things they don't want to do. Am I even in a position to bring peace to geopolitical strife? Like, not even close. And sometimes it can be so overwhelming that many of us are tempted just to check out, to shut down. But remember, the good life, what Jesus described, is he said, God blesses those who make peace. See, friends, there's a difference between making peace and avoiding conflict. All of us have different personalities, and some of us would have to admit that we are conflict avoidant. Maybe in the name of not upsetting anyone, we don't want to ruffle feathers, so we just find ourselves wiggling out of any awkward conversation we find ourselves in. Or maybe growing up, the only kind of conflict you saw devolved into voices raising and name calling, and you don't even have a frame of reference as to how it can end peacefully. So how can we pursue this God's way? I want to reread the way Jesus described this beatitude one more time, because he never wasted words. He always said what he meant. And he said, God blesses those who work for peace, for they will be called the children of God. In your family, there is a family resemblance in some way. It might be a facial feature that makes you look like your dad, and that's why everyone always brings it up. Or there's an expression you picked up from your mom, and when you say it out loud, all of a sudden you hear her voice. Or maybe your family was so generous to pass down things like poor eyesight or arthritis. It just makes you think about them all the time, very kind to them. What Jesus is saying is that the minute you start following him, you join the family of God, which means you start looking more like our dad. And so what we want to pursue today is, how does God the Father make peace? This might sound weird at first, but you and I have been warring with God our entire lives. Every conflict exists on some scale between minor inconvenience and outright war. And it might sound a little over the top and a little dramatic to talk about war with God, but that's not my idea. That's how he described it. Look at Romans 8. It says, for the sinful nature is always hostile to God. It never did obey God's laws, and it never will. That's why those who are still under the control of their sinful nature can never please God. For some of us, those two verses probably aren't all that convincing, especially if you're new to all this. But let me ask you, can you think about all the different ways that you have resisted or outright rejected God throughout your life? We resist God with what we think. You and I, we live in a highly individualistic, highly autonomous culture that doesn't like to be told what to think. But at some point in your journey with Jesus, there's going to be this conflict where you discover what God already said, and it contradicts what you already thought. And you're going to have a choice to make. Am I going to demand that what I already think wins, or am I going to submit to what God already said? And quite frankly, there are many of us that when we come to God, we bring a list of our conclusions that are not amendable. We say, this is what I already think, God, and unless you agree with me, then I can't follow you. We resist him with what we think. We resist him with what we want. That's our wills and our desires. You and I live in a culture that has elevated desire to the ultimate pinnacle, saying if we want it, then we should get it. And anyone that tells us that we shouldn't get what we want doesn't have our best interest in mind. And then, at some point in your journey with Jesus, you're going to discover that he, in a very loving way, created boundaries for you and me. He created direction for you and me. And at some point, it is going to come into conflict with what we want. So we're going to say, God, I know that you created sex as a gift to married couples so that it would bond them together. You said it's in that relationship that it was designed to be in. It's really good in there and nowhere else. But I sure want it. And she's willing, so I'm going for it. We say, God, I know that you told me that the reason you gave me anything is because I want to recognize you as the provider and to help other people, but that paycheck has my name on it, and I want to buy some things, and so I'm going for it. We reject God with what we think, with what we want, and then also how we feel. We would have to admit that many of us have responded to God with a coldness toward him. I want you to imagine for a moment, you're just walking down the street at some point this week and someone pulls you aside and says, I would like to pay off all of your credit card debt right now. I would like to erase your student loans. I want to pick up the remaining payments on your mortgage. How would you respond to that kind of act of generosity? Hopefully with undying gratitude. But when we look at God, there may be a baseline of gratitude. But there's also an air of dissatisfaction saying, yeah, but what else can you do for me? And the very moment he doesn't give us what we think we deserve, what do? We question whether he was ever good in the first place. You and I have constantly been resisting, pushing back, and warring with God. Sometimes you'll hear people talk about, either personally or just generally, the pursuit to find God. That we are pursuing some kind of truth. And usually the way we talk about it is we put ourselves in the hero position in the story as if we have to go find something that's unfindable. Discover a treasure map with all the truth written on the back that people were keeping from us. But friends, I'm afraid we're giving ourselves a little too much credit. Maybe you've seen the paintings that live on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in Vatican City. It's painted by Michelangelo, and there are these beautiful depictions of biblical stories. And right at the center of it is the picture of God and man, the very first man, Adam. And what you see with God is that he is extending his arm and his finger with every ounce of strength, trying to connect with his creation, humanity. And in what position is Adam? He's laid back, lackadaisical, barely even lifting a finger to connect with God. I think that's more accurate. Whether it's a limp finger or an outright stiff arm, you and I have been rejecting his pursuit every single day. It's outright war. And with that being the case, God could have responded to you and me in any number of ways. He could have said, fine, if they think they're so smart, if they think they've got it figured out, I'll just leave them to the consequences of their own decisions. He could have said, I will totally forgive them as soon as they apologize. But God didn't say any of that. He did the exact opposite. What we're going to read in Romans 5 is God's reaction to our resistance. God's reaction to our war against him. And you're going to see a few phrases that are highlighted, and I'd like to invite you to participate by reading them out loud with me to help them sink in a little bit more. Here we go, Romans 5. It says, when we were utterly helpless, Christ came at just the right time and died for us sinners. Now, most people would not be willing to die for an upright person, though someone might perhaps be willing to die for a person who's especially good. But God showed his great love for us by sending Christ to die for us while we were still sinners. And since we've been made right in God's sight by the blood of Christ, he will certainly save us from God's condemnation. For since our friendship with God was restored by the death of his Son while we were still his enemies, we will certainly be saved through the life of his Son. So now we can rejoice in our wonderful new relationship with God, because our Lord Jesus Christ has made us friends of God. Friends, isn't that amazing? The only way for you and I to make peace with other people in our life is to first recognize that Jesus made peace with us. It's the only way I can stop fighting for all this attention because Jesus has already told me who I am. It's the only way I can stop begging for more resources because I'm finally convinced that God will truly provide. It's the only way that I stop demanding for my voice to be heard because I'm no longer living for myself. I'm living for Him. When I'm finally at peace with God, then I can be at peace with others. This week, I was reflecting a little bit as to whether there was a pattern of the conflict in my life. Is there some kind of repetitious behavior that finds me at odds with other people? A few years ago, Trudy and I were in a counseling session, and the counselor gave me a phrase that really helped me. She called it my sore spot. And you know how like when you have a bruise on your leg, and then you're walking by a table and you just happen to glance the side of it, and all of a sudden you're doubled over in pain, and you're trying to think, why does that hurt so bad? It's because it was already sore. And every single one of us, and all of our souls, there is some kind of sore spot. It's the thing when someone hits it, either unintentionally, or we would have to admit sometimes people do it intentionally, it hurts all the more. We have this disproportionate reaction. We flare up and get defensive because they hit the sore spot. And I found this week, and upon my reflection, that my sore spot comes from finding my identity in this life as a performer. Someone that does a good job. Someone that's respected and admired. And so when people compliment me on being good at something, when people admire or praise the thing that I've done, it tells me that I have value in this life. But here's the danger of finding your identity as a performer is that the flip side is also true. That when someone questions the decision that you made, criticizes something that you put out into the world, they're no longer questioning or criticizing that choice. They're questioning and criticizing your value in this life. And you flare up and you get defensive and you think, how could they? In our family, we have 4 kids, and our youngest is 3 years old. Her name is Cosetta. We call her Cozy for short. We have unapologetically decided to spoil her rotten, and it is working. All right, it is working. She will be a nightmare as a teenager, but we're not changing our way because she is super cute. And so every day when I get home and I open that door, she is the one that runs up to me. Not even the dog runs up to me, all right? She's the only one that comes and greets me. And she's got this line that she says every single time. She says, "Daddy, you're back." It doesn't matter whether I've been gone 5 minutes or 5 days. It's always, "Daddy, you're back." It might be the reason she gets everything that she wants. And as I'm holding this 3-year-old little girl, what's really cool about her is she has no idea whether you're getting anything out of this message at all. She has no idea whether I am respected or admired. She has no clue whether anyone has ever followed me at all. All she knows is that she loves me and she's glad that I'm back. And friends, I want you to hear this loud and clear. God is not waiting for you to finally perform well enough to be loved. He's not waiting for you to finally get your act together like He told you to do so many years ago to finally be accepted. When you and I follow Jesus, all He's looking at us and telling us is, "I love you and I'm glad you're back." And when we find that peace with God, when we no longer have to perform for Him and perform for others, then we get to relieve all the other people in our lives of performing for us. Most of the conflict comes because they didn't perform well enough, and now there's tension. And when we recognize that our identity for all of eternity is not about our performance to God, then we can be very gracious with other people. Now, I also know that as we go out this week, you are walking back into some relationship or some relationships that are experiencing conflict right now. And before you try to go make a whole lot of peace this week, I want to give you 3 questions to ask before you enter into that conversation. The first question is this: do I want to be right or reconcile? See, we often in the middle of conflict, tensions rise, emotions flare. We kind of get this tunnel vision, and all we can see is what that other person did wrong. In fact, some of you have been thinking, yeah, I know how to make peace is when they apologize. Right? It's when they finally get their act together and see it like I see it. It's like, well, that's one strategy. But just remember that no one would have been more justified in sitting in his own rightness and judging our wrongness than Jesus himself. But while we were still his enemies, he pursued peace with us. And now it's part of the family resemblance. Question number 2, what am I trying to prove? What am I trying to prove? Maybe, like me, you found your identity in something other than Jesus. And so when people don't see you, they don't value you, they don't respect you, it leads to a lot of offense. It leads to a lot of conflict. And it feels like they're demeaning and they're critical. It'd be wise to take a beat and ask, am I trying to make peace or am I trying to prove myself? Why is it so important that this person sees me as important if God has already declared me eternally loved? Question number 3, what can I own? It's entirely possible that the person that you've been thinking about this whole time is 100% in the wrong and you are 100% in the right. They did all the bad stuff, you didn't do any of it, but I want you to know that is very rare. Almost in every conflict, we can own a portion of it, even if it's the vast minority of it. But the humility and the courage it requires to own our part in the tension goes a long way to making peace. Every week, we have the opportunity to remember how God made peace with us. And I'm going to describe it, and I'm going to encourage you just to not move, not wrestle with anything until I'm done praying for it. But we have this opportunity to remember just the lengths that God went to make peace with us. See, when you and I were at war with God, actively refusing his counsel and rejecting his love, more than an apology was necessary. God is a God of justice, which means someone had to pay the price for the crime of sin, and we owed God a debt. And in order to reconcile us to God, to make peace, Jesus lived the perfect life you and I couldn't live. And he paid the price for our sin on the cross. He overcame our ultimate enemy, death, and now he has promised us a perfect eternity. It's a reward that only he could earn, but now it's counted as ours. Our identity in this life is not our moral performance. It's Jesus' performance counted as ours, and I hope we can sit back in awe of that today. The way we remember the way God made peace with us is through a symbol called communion. There's bread and juice that represents Jesus' body and blood, and it draws us to just the price that was paid so that we could find peace. It doesn't bring shame or guilt. It's actually the exact opposite. It's a stunning reminder of the love required to make peace with enemies. And I hope it's special for you today. If you didn't grab the elements on the way in, all you need to do is raise your hand, and one of our awesome volunteers will make sure you get what you need. And if you're here today and this is new to you, you're not really sure what you believe, where you stand, man, we won't want you to pretend. We don't want you to fake it. You don't have to participate at all if you're not ready. You can simply take these next few minutes of quiet as our gift to you. Reflect on what you've heard today. But before we jump in, I'd love to pray for you, and then you'll have time to take it on your own. Father, we are so grateful that you've given us this gift, and that as our dad, you made peace with us before we knew we needed it, definitely before we wanted it. You extended love and mercy and kindness to people that were rejecting you left and right, that were denying your gratitude, that we just didn't see who you were. And you pursued us, and you loved us, and you made peace with us, and now we get to go do that for other people. God, will you give us the courage to surrender the justice in our bones that we think we need? We let us press pause on demanding what we deserve. Will you let us see people like you see people, flawed, and broken and sinful, in desperate need of loving kindness. God, it's in your name I pray. Amen. You can take communion in your own time.